Carbs, carbs, carbs. Do I need to eat a whole bunch of carbs in order to have better workouts, in order to build muscle, in order to perform better physically, also mentally? Well, short answer is no, my fine feather friends, and we've talked about that in regards to muscle growth. It does not necessarily require sugar. When you look at glycogen, stored sugar in muscles, right? Well, that's something that gives you energy for exercise, also energy for supporting protein synthesis, right, and building muscle, right, after you've exercised and things of that nature. But you can make glycogen, that's stored sugar in your muscles, without eating high amounts of carbs, really with almost no carbs. Now, how is that? And how does it affect performance? So we've talked about how it affects muscle growth, but in terms of performance, a recent meta-analysis of 6 randomized controlled trials involving 120 healthy resistance-trained athletes had them either undergo a ketogenic diet, which was 5% carbs, right, or 50 grams of carbs in a day, or they had them have a high-carb diet, and that was 55%, so 11 times the amount of carbs, of their daily caloric intake came in the form of carbohydrates. And they assessed their 1 rep max, their power, how much weight they could lift with 1 rep relative to, before the intervention and after the intervention. And there was no statistically significant difference between groups. So those who were keto, eating pretty much no carbs, were able to lift the same amount of weight. Okay, and that goes for 1 rep max. But what about endurance training? That might be a little bit different. Maybe if you're running a marathon, you would like to, have some carbs. You have the pasta parties the night before and things like that. There's a decent body of evidence that says, all right, if you have more carbs, you'll perform better with endurance stuff. Okay, potentially. But when it comes to muscle growth and glycogen stores, other studies have shown that your muscles will spare and utilize glycogen to an equal degree whether you have a ketogenic or high carbohydrate diet. And so how is that? How could that possibly be if we're using sugar to make glycogen, right? That's our stored form of sugar in our muscles that gives us energy when we work out. You get energy in other ways, and on top of that, you can still make the glycogen without sugar. And a lot of people don't understand this, but in metabolism, when you break down fats and amino acids, you can use the metabolites or the byproducts of fat breakdown or amino acid, aka protein breakdown, to make more glycogen in your muscles. It doesn't have to be sugar used as a substrate there or something that is utilized to produce the glycogen, you could say, right? And so then wait, Dr. Shane, hold the phone, man. You trying to tell me that I'm going to be break down my protein to make sugar? I don't want to do that. I want to keep my protein. Well, of course you do, right? But that only would happen if you did not have enough oxygen. Remember, if you have the presence of oxygen, then your body goes like this in terms of what it breaks down. Sugar, fat, then, only then, it will go to protein, right, to amino acids. And so if you have ample amounts of oxygen, you're working out slowly, doing sets and taking rest and doing sets and, like a bodybuilder type workout or whatever, you'll use fat, the byproducts of fat breakdown, to help produce more of that glycogen. But if you were doing really high intensity training, you need oxygen to break down fat. So now you're not getting enough oxygen that your body has to use while you're sprinting and you're doing all this fast training and HIIT training. It has to use something other than the sugar to make glycogen. It would break down your amino acids, and it would use those byproducts to make more glycogen. And so how can you avoid that if you're doing intense training, right? Something where you're not getting enough oxygen, that HIIT training, these high intensity things, and you want to be ketogenic, right? You want to eat mostly healthy fats, and you don't want to have a lot of carbs. Well, I think that's a great question, and one cheat code is to have creatine before your workout. Creatine gives you energy in a pathway that is independent of breaking down sugar, proteins, fats, anything else. And in fact, your body, your brain, and your body, your muscles will go to creatine, the phosphagen pathway, where creatine donates a phosphate. It's creatine monophosphate. Creatine is an amino acid. Mono is 1. Phosphate is phosphorus bound to 4 oxygen. So it takes the phosphate that's bound to creatine, donates it to ADP, adenosine diphosphate, right? It has 2 phosphates and adenosine, and it converts it with that extra phosphate to adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, which is the major stored form of energy, utilized form of energy in the body. When you break down sugar, you get ATP. When you break down fat, you get ATP. When you break down amino acids for energy, you eventually get ATP, right? But you can get ATP independent of any of that with creatine. And so if you're doing high intensity stuff and just exercise in general, creatine's great for promoting muscle growth. It's an osmolyte, helps to hydrate cells, right? It's why you want a little bit more water when you have it. And it's just fine on the kidneys, unless you have chronic kidney disease. It increases numbers of satellite cells. Those are stem cells in your skeletal muscle. So it basically makes you produce more muscle cells. Increases insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1, associated with growth hormone release, and also associated with increased influx or intake of amino acids, or the building blocks of protein, into your muscles to build more muscle proteins in your muscle, right? And it inhibits myostatin. Myostatin blocks muscle cell growth, right? So if you block the thing that blocks muscle cells from dividing, that's going to stimulate muscle growth as well. So creatine is fantastic for a wide array of reasons, but it is something that can also give you energy if you're doing intense training and you don't want to eat all that many carbs. And now hopefully you understand metabolically how you can produce glycogen without having high amounts of carbohydrates. And this goes for body composition, and this goes for performance alike. So that's what we got for you guys. I think that's super cool. I hope you guys find that as cool as I do, and I hope it's useful, most importantly. Graham Coach, what's up? Mwev Jr., Ma, love you. See you tomorrow. Kendrick, what's up? Sujit, Ash, hello, baby. What's up? Clara Johnson and Adventures, as for now. So we got for you, folks. We'll see you tomorrow, baby. Not sure where, not sure when, but we'll see you then. Have an amazing day today. Happy Friday and happy One Wellness. We'll see you later.